The autumn wind howled through the broken windows of the abandoned schoolhouse, carrying with it the acrid smell of old smoke and the promise of an early winter. In the cramped attic space, above what had once been a place of learning and laughter, Clara Hutchins pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders and tried to ignore the gnawing hunger in her stomach. For 2 weeks, Clara had been hiding in this burned-out shell of a building, living on rainwater collected in a rusty tin cup and whatever edible plants she could forage during her brief, terrified excursions into the surrounding woods. The schoolhouse had been destroyed in a fire 6 months earlier, and the town had written it off as a total loss, making it the perfect hiding place for someone who couldn't afford to be found. At 25, Clara should have been settling into married life, perhaps raising children of her own in a comfortable home. Instead, she was a fugitive, hiding from a man who claimed to love her, but whose idea of love involved bruises, threats, and the kind of control that made prison seem preferable to marriage. Marcus Blackwood had been courting Clara for over a year, presenting himself as a prosperous businessman who could provide her with security and social standing. What Clara hadn't realized until after their engagement was that Marcus's business dealings were far from legitimate, and his idea of a wife was essentially an attractive possession who would never question his activities or challenge his authority. When Clara had discovered evidence of Marcus's involvement in cattle rustling and discovered he had murdered a rival businessman, she had tried to break their engagement. Marcus's response had been swift and terrifying. He had beaten her unconscious and locked her in his cellar, telling her she would learn to be an obedient wife, or she would learn what happened to women who betrayed him. Clara had escaped during a thunderstorm when Marcus was away on business, but she knew he would never stop looking for her. He had too much invested in their upcoming marriage, too much pride wrapped up in owning her completely. So she had hidden in the one place no one would think to look, a building that everyone assumed was too damaged to shelter anyone. The sound of approaching footsteps made Clara freeze with terror. Someone was walking around the perimeter of the schoolhouse, their boots crunching on the fallen leaves that carpeted the ground. Clara held her breath, praying that whoever it was would move on without investigating the building's interior. But the footsteps stopped directly below her hiding place, and Clara heard a man's voice calling out softly, "Hello, is someone up there? I saw light from a candle last night, and I know someone's been taking apples from the wild tree behind the building." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs as she considered her options. She could remain silent and hope the stranger would give up and leave, or she could try to flee through the small window that served as her only escape route. But she was weak from hunger and exhaustion, and she wasn't sure she had the strength to make the dangerous climb down the outside wall. "I'm not here to hurt you," the voice continued, and Clara could hear genuine concern in the man's tone. "My name is Samuel Reed, and I live on the ranch about a mile from here. I've been watching this place because I was worried about vagrants. But if you're hiding here because you're in trouble, maybe I can help." Clara remained silent, too frightened to trust a stranger's offer of help. In her experience, men who claimed they wanted to help usually wanted something in return, and she couldn't afford to trust the wrong person. "Listen," Samuel called up. "Again, it's going to be below freezing tonight, and this building has no heat. You'll die of exposure if you try to stay here much longer. I'm going to leave some supplies by the front door, food, blankets, and a lamp. You don't have to talk to me or show yourself, but please take what you need to survive." Clara heard him moving around below, the sound of items being set down near the entrance. Then his footsteps moved away, growing fainter until they disappeared entirely. Clara waited for what felt like hours before creeping down from her hiding place to investigate what he had left. On the floor near the door, she found a canvas bag containing bread, cheese, dried meat, and a thermos of hot soup that brought tears to her eyes with its warmth and richness. There were also 2 heavy wool blankets, a proper oil lamp, and a note written in careful script. "My offer of help stands. If you need anything else, hang one of these blankets in the broken window facing north. I'll check every evening at sunset. You don't have to be alone in this." As Clara clutched the note to her chest, overwhelmed by this stranger's kindness. It had been so long since anyone had treated her with simple human decency. that she had almost forgotten such people existed. But even as she gratefully consumed the first real meal she had eaten in weeks, Clara knew she couldn't afford to trust Samuel Reed completely. Marcus had taught her that men's kindness always came with a price, and she couldn't risk discovering what Samuel's price might be. For 3 days, Clara survived on the supplies Samuel had left, rationing them carefully to make them last as long as possible. On the 4th evening, driven by desperation and the knowledge that winter was approaching rapidly, she hung one of the blankets in the north-facing window as Samuel had instructed. True to his word, Samuel appeared at sunset, approaching the schoolhouse with the same careful, non-threatening manner he had displayed before. "I'm glad you decided to signal," Samuel called out. "What do you need? More food? Warmer clothes? Medical attention?" Clara found her voice for the first time in weeks, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Food, please, and maybe some tea if you have any. I've been so cold." "Of course," Samuel replied immediately. "I'll bring you everything I can spare. Are you injured? Do you need a doctor?" Clara touched the fading bruises on her face and arms, grateful that Samuel couldn't see them in the darkness. "No doctor, please. I just need to stay hidden for a while longer." "All right," Samuel said gently. "No doctors, no questions. But winter's coming fast, and this building won't keep you alive through a Montana blizzard. When you're ready, there's a warm cabin on my ranch where you could stay safely. No strings attached, no obligations. Just a warm, dry place where no one would think to look for you." Clara felt tears sting her eyes at his offer. "Why would you help someone you don't even know? What if I'm a criminal? What if helping me gets you in trouble?" Samuel was quiet for a moment before answering. "Because 3 years ago, I was the one who needed help and couldn't ask for it. Someone took a chance on me when I was at my lowest point, and it saved my life. Maybe it's my turn to return that kindness." That night, Clara lay wrapped in Samuel's warm blankets, eating bread and cheese while sipping tea that tasted like hope. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that there might be genuinely good people in the world, people who helped others without expecting payment or control in return. But even as hope flickered in her heart, Clara knew that accepting Samuel's help would mean trusting him with her life. And after everything Marcus had done to her, trust felt like the most dangerous luxury she could imagine. The question was whether she was brave enough to take that risk, or whether fear would keep her trapped in this cold, lonely attic until winter claimed her life. As the wind howled around the broken schoolhouse and Clara pulled Samuel's blankets closer round her shoulders, she found herself thinking about the warmth in his voice when he spoke to her, the respect he showed for her need to remain hidden, and the simple decency of leaving supplies without demanding anything in return. Maybe, just maybe, there were still men in the world who understood that real strength came from protecting others, rather than controlling them. Are you enjoying Clara's story of finding hope in the darkest places? Subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell to follow her journey and discover more tales of love, courage, and compassion on the American frontier. 2 weeks had passed since Samuel Reed first left supplies at the abandoned schoolhouse, and a routine had developed between him and the mysterious woman hiding in the attic. Every evening at sunset, Samuel would arrive with food, blankets, or other necessities, leaving them near the door and speaking gently to the darkness above, never pressuring her to reveal herself but always letting her know she wasn't alone. Clara had begun to look forward to these visits with an anticipation that surprised her. Samuel's voice had become a lifeline, a reminder that kindness still existed in a world that had shown her mostly cruelty. She found herself listening carefully to his tone, learning to recognize his moods and concerns from the way he spoke about the weather, his ranch work, or his worries about the approaching winter. The temperature dropped to near freezing last night. Samuel called out on this particular evening, his breath visible in the cold air. "I brought you extra blankets and a small camping stove with fuel. It's not much, but it should help keep you warm and let you heat water for tea." Clara had grown brave enough to respond regularly to his offerings, though she still remained hidden in her attic sanctuary. "Thank you, Samuel. You've been so kind. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." You don't need to repay kindness, Samuel replied firmly. That's not how it works. But I am getting worried about you staying here much longer. We're going to have snow soon. And this building just isn't safe for winter weather. Clara had been dreading this conversation, knowing it was inevitable but terrified of the choices it represented. Samuel, I want you to know that your offer of shelter is incredibly generous. But I need you to understand, I'm not hiding here by choice. There's someone looking for me. Someone who hurt me. If he found me at your ranch, he might hurt you too. Samuel's response was immediate and decisive. Let him try. Clara, that is your name, isn't it? I heard you whisper it in your sleep one night when I was leaving supplies. Let me worry about protecting both of us. You're not facing this alone anymore. Clara felt her throat tighten with emotion at hearing her name spoken with such gentleness. How do you know I'm worth protecting? You don't know anything about me, about my past, about what kind of person I am. I know enough, Samuel said firmly. I know you say please and thank you even when you're desperate. I know you've been sharing the food I bring with the stray cats that live in this building, even though you're half-starved yourself. I know you folded and returned the blankets I left the first night, even though you desperately needed them, because you didn't want to take more than was offered. Clara was amazed that Samuel had noticed these small details, that he had been paying attention to her character, rather than just her circumstances. Those things don't make me special, Samuel. They just make me, exactly, Samuel replied. And the you I've come to know through these conversations is someone worth protecting, worth caring about, worth taking risks for. Clara, whoever hurt you was wrong about your value. You matter, and you deserve to be safe. That night, as Clara sat by the small camping stove Samuel had brought, warming her hands around a cup of hot tea, she made a decision that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. She would accept Samuel's offer of shelter, but first, she needed to tell him the truth about what he would be risking by helping her. The next evening, when Samuel arrived with his usual offerings of food and conversation, Clara took a deep breath and began to speak. Samuel, if I'm going to accept your help, you need to know what you're getting involved in. My name is Clara Hutchins, and I was engaged to marry a man named Marcus Blackwood. He owns a large ranch north of here, and most people think he's a respectable businessman. Samuel listened in silence as Clara told him about Marcus's hidden criminal activities, his violent control over her, her discovery of his involvement in murder, and her desperate escape from his captivity. He won't give up looking for me, Clara concluded, her voice shaking with remembered fear. Marcus doesn't accept losing anything he considers his property, and he's made it clear that he considers me his property. If he finds me at your ranch, he'll kill you without hesitation and drag me back to face punishment that I might not survive. Samuel was quiet for a long moment after Clara finished her story, and she held her breath, waiting for him to withdraw his offer of help now that he understood the full scope of the danger. Instead, Samuel's voice, when it came, was calm and determined. Clara, Marcus Blackwood is a bully and a criminal who's used fear to control you for too long. But he's not invincible, and he's not going to hurt you again. Not while I'm alive to prevent it. Samuel, you don't understand what kind of man he is, and you don't understand what kind of man I am. Samuel interrupted gently. Clara, I served as a cavalry scout during the war. I've dealt with men like Blackwood before, men who think violence and intimidation make them powerful. They're usually cowards at heart, and they fold when faced with someone who isn't afraid of them. Clara felt a flutter of hope mixed with terror. Are you saying you're not afraid of Marcus? I'm saying I'm more afraid of leaving you to face him alone than I am of facing him myself. Samuel replied. Clara, tomorrow night, I'm going to bring a wagon and some heavy coats. It's time for you to come home with me. Home, Clara repeated softly, the word sounding foreign on her tongue. It had been so long since she'd had a real home that she'd almost forgotten what the concept meant. Yes, home, Samuel confirmed. A place where you're safe, warm, and valued. A place where you can heal from what's been done to you and remember what it feels like to be treated with respect and kindness. The next evening, Clara made the terrifying decision to trust Samuel completely. She climbed down from her attic, hiding place for the first time in weeks, her legs shaky from disuse and malnutrition, her heart pounding with fear and anticipation. Samuel was waiting beside a sturdy wagon loaded with hay and blankets to keep her warm during the journey. When Clara emerged from the schoolhouse, Samuel turned to look at her, and she saw his expression change as he took in her appearance, the fading bruises on her face, her emaciated frame, the way she held herself as if expecting a blow. "Clara," Samuel said softly, and there was such gentleness in his voice that Clara almost broke down completely. "You're safe now. I give you my word that no one will ever hurt you again." As Samuel helped her into the wagon, wrapping her carefully in warm blankets, Clara marveled at the difference between his touch and Marcus's. Where Marcus had grabbed and controlled, Samuel offered support. Where Marcus had demanded submission, Samuel requested permission. Where Marcus had inspired fear, Samuel offered comfort. The ride to Samuel's ranch took less than an hour, but for Clara, it felt like a journey between two different worlds. She was leaving behind the cold, frightening existence of hiding and survival, and moving towards something she had almost forgotten was possible: safety, warmth, and the possibility of healing. Samuel's ranch was modest, but well-maintained, with a comfortable log cabin, a sturdy barn, and corrals that spoke of a man who took pride in his work. As they approached the cabin, Clara could see warm light glowing in the windows and smoke rising from the chimney, signs of the comfort and security that awaited her. "Welcome to the Double S Ranch," Samuel said as he helped her down from the wagon. "It's not much, but it's peaceful, and it's yours for as long as you need it." As Clara walked toward the cabin that would be her sanctuary, supported by Samuel's gentle strength, she felt something she hadn't experienced in over a year. Hope. Real, tangible hope that her life could be more than just survival, that healing was possible, and that there were still good men in the world who understood that true strength came from protecting others rather than controlling them. Behind her lay the abandoned schoolhouse where she had hidden in fear and desperation. Ahead lay the possibility of a new beginning with a man who had proven his character through actions rather than words, who had seen her at her lowest point and offered help without conditions or expectations. Clara didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time in months, she was looking forward to finding out. Clara's journey from hiding to hope is just beginning. Will Samuel be able to protect her from Marcus? Can love bloom from such difficult circumstances? Subscribe now and hit that notification bell to follow their story and discover more tales of courage, healing, and unexpected love in the Old West. 3 months had passed since Samuel brought Clara home to the Double S Ranch, and the transformation in her had been remarkable. The frightened, malnourished woman who had emerged from the schoolhouse attic had slowly given way to someone who smiled freely, laughed at Samuel's gentle humor, and moved through the cabin with the confidence of someone who knew she was truly safe. Clara had her own room in the cabin, a cozy space with a window that looked out over the valley and a fireplace that Samuel kept stocked with wood. She had gradually taken over the household management, finding purpose and peace in cooking, cleaning, and tending to the small garden that would provide vegetables for the following year. Most importantly, she had begun to heal emotionally, learning to trust again under Samuel's patient and respectful care. Samuel had proven to be everything his voice had promised. During those evenings at the schoolhouse, kind without being patronizing, protective without being controlling, strong without being intimidating, he treated Clara as an equal partner in managing the ranch, asking her opinions about decisions and valuing her intelligence and practical skills. But on this cold December morning, their peaceful existence was about to be shattered. Clara was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when she heard the sound of multiple horses approaching the ranch. Through the window, she could see 6 mounted men led by a figure that made her blood turn to ice. Marcus Blackwood, looking every bit as handsome and dangerous as she remembered. "Samuel," Clara called out urgently, her voice tight with terror. "He's here. Marcus is here with armed men." Samuel appeared from his bedroom, fully dressed and already strapping on his gun belt. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard with determination. "Clara, I want you to go to the root cellar and stay there until this is over. Don't come out no matter what you hear. I won't hide while you face him alone," Clara said firmly. surprising herself with her courage. "This is my fight, Samuel. He's here because of me. He's here because he's a bully who can't accept that his victim escaped," Samuel corrected firmly. "But you're not his victim anymore, Clara. You're under my protection, and I intend to keep you safe." Before Clara could argue further, Marcus's voice rang out across the yard, carrying all the arrogant authority she remembered so well. "Samuel Reed, I know you're harboring my runaway fiancé. Send Clara out immediately, and we can settle this like civilized men. Otherwise, things are going to get very unpleasant for everyone involved." Samuel stepped onto the front porch, his hand resting casually on his gun butt. Clara watched from the window, her heart pounding with fear for the man who had become her protector, her friend, and if she was honest with herself, so much more. "Blackwood," Samuel called out calmly, "Clara Hutchins is here of her own free will, and she's under my protection. If you have business with her, you can state it and leave. But you're not taking her anywhere against her will." Marcus dismounted from his horse with fluid grace, his pale eyes fixed on the cabin with predatory intensity. "Reed, you're harboring a woman who belongs to me. Clara and I are legally engaged to be married, which gives me certain rights regarding her whereabouts and welfare. The only right you have," Samuel replied evenly, "is the right to leave my property before I remove you by force. Clara has made it clear she wants nothing to do with you, and that's the end of the discussion." Clara could see the rage building in Marcus's expression at Samuel's calm defiance. Marcus was a man accustomed to intimidating others into submission, and Samuel's obvious lack of fear was clearly infuriating him. "Reed, you don't know what you're dealing with," Marcus snarled. "That woman is mine. She's going to marry me whether she likes it or not, and anyone who stands in my way is going to regret it." "The only one who's going to regret anything," said a new voice, "is you, Blackwood." Clara's heart leaped as she saw Sheriff Tom Morrison emerging from behind the barn, accompanied by 2 deputies with rifles trained on Marcus's men. Samuel had clearly been expecting this confrontation and had prepared for it thoroughly. Marcus's confident expression faltered slightly as he realized he was outmaneuvered. "Sheriff Morrison, what's the meaning of this? I'm here to collect my property." "Clara Hutchins isn't property," the sheriff interrupted coldly. "She's a citizen who's made a formal complaint about your criminal activities. We have warrants for your arrest on charges of cattle rustling, murder, and assault." The next few minutes were a blur of shouted orders, drawn weapons, and the satisfying sight of Marcus Blackwood being placed in shackles, while his hired guns were disarmed and arrested. Clara watched from the window as the man who had terrorized her for so long was finally held accountable for his crimes when the sheriff and his prisoners had departed. Clara emerged from the cabin to find Samuel sitting on the porch steps, his face pale with the aftermath of adrenaline. She sat down beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his body, but careful not to crowd him. "It's over," Samuel said quietly. "Marcus will be tried for his crimes, and even if he somehow escapes conviction on the murder charge, the cattle rustling evidence is ironclad. He'll be in prison for years." Clara felt tears of relief streaming down her face. "Samuel, how did you know to contact the sheriff? How did you know he would help?" "Because Tom Morrison is a good man who's been looking for evidence against Blackwood for months," Samuel replied. "Your testimony was exactly what he needed to build a case. Clara, you're free, really, truly free." They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, both processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. Finally, Clara found the courage to voice the question that had been growing in her heart for weeks. "Samuel, what happens now? Now that I'm safe, now that I don't need protection anymore? Do you still want me here?" Samuel turned to look at her with surprise. "Clara, don't you know? Don't you understand what these past months have meant to me?" Clara shook her head, afraid to hope for too much. Samuel took her hands in his larger ones, his touch gentle but firm. "Clara, you've brought light to a life that was dark, purpose to days that were empty, joy to a heart that had forgotten how to be happy. I don't just want you here because you need protection. I want you here because I can't imagine my life without you." Clara felt her heart soar with a happiness so pure it took her breath away. "Samuel, I love you, not because you saved me, not because you protected me, but because you're the kindest, strongest, most decent man I've ever known. You've shown me what real love looks like." When Samuel kissed her for the first time, it was with the reverence of a man who understood how precious trust could be, and the passion of a man who had found his perfect match. Clara responded with all the love and gratitude in her heart, marveling at the difference between this gentle claiming and the violent possession Marcus had tried to force on her. "Marry me, Clara," Samuel whispered against her lips. "Not because you need protection or because you owe me anything, but because I love you with all my heart and want to spend the rest of my life making you happy." "Yes," Clara replied, laughing through her tears of joy. "Yes, Samuel Reed, I will marry you, and I will spend every day showing you that your faith in me was justified." 6 months later, Clara stood in the same kitchen where she had first seen Marcus approaching with his men, but everything had changed. She wore a simple white wedding dress that Samuel had commissioned from the finest seamstress in the territory, and her hair was adorned with wild flowers from the meadow where they had shared their first picnic. The ceremony took place in their front yard, surrounded by neighbors who had come to witness the union of two people who had found perfect love. In the aftermath of trauma, Sheriff Morrison was there, along with his wife and children. The local preacher, who had heard Clara's story and admired her courage, performed the service with obvious joy. "Do you, Samuel Reed, take Clara Hutchins to be your lawfully wedded wife, to love and to cherish, to protect and to honor, as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Samuel said firmly, his eyes shining with love and pride. "And I promise to spend every day proving that love doesn't have to hurt, that protection doesn't require control, and that home is wherever we are together." "And do you, Clara Hutchins, take Samuel Reed to be your lawfully wedded husband, to love and to cherish, to support and to honor, as long as you both shall live?" Clara looked into the warm brown eyes of the man who had brought her a blanket when she was hiding in an attic and had never stopped caring for her since that moment. "I do," she said clearly, "and I promise to trust in his love, to build a life with him based on mutual respect and genuine partnership, and to never forget that he saved me not just from danger, but from despair." As they kissed to seal their vows, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment of perfect happiness. She had been hiding in the attic of a burned-out schoolhouse, convinced that her life was over, when Samuel Reed had appeared with a blanket and the kind of stubborn compassion that refused to give up on her. He had brought her more than just physical comfort. He had brought her hope, healing, and the chance to discover what real love felt like. Most importantly, he had never left her to face her fears alone, keeping his silent promise to stay by her side through every challenge and triumph. Years later, as Clara watched their children play in the same yard where she had once faced down her tormentor, she marveled at how completely her life had changed. The frightened woman hiding in an attic had become a confident wife and mother, secure in the knowledge that she was loved unconditionally by a man who saw her as his equal partner in all things. Samuel had kept every promise he had made during those evenings at the schoolhouse. He had given her safety, warmth, respect, and a love so steady and true that it had healed wounds she thought would never stop hurting. The lonely woman in the attic had been found by a man who brought her a blanket and never left her side again. And in that simple act of consistent kindness, both their lives had been transformed forever. And so ends Clara's incredible journey from hiding in fear to finding true love and safety. Thank you for joining us for this heartwarming tale of courage, compassion, and the power of never giving up on someone who needs help. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell to be the first to see our next emotional Western tale. Share this story with someone who believes in the power of kindness to change lives. Tell us in the comments, what moment in Clara and Samuel's story moved you the most? We love hearing from our viewers. Until next time, remember that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can save a life and change everything. Keep watching for more stories of love, hope, and the unbreakable human spirit on the American frontier.